episode of Club Grief. Lessons I've learned from loss of a loved one. Let's talk about it. Lessons that I've learned from loss. The loss of a loved one. You might have noticed in the English language, a lot of those words begin with the letter L. That is known as alliteration. I use it in my writing, my poetry, and in my songwriting. Okay, let me stop for a moment. We will get back to lessons, but I want to let you know, I got up this morning, there was an email from the distributor of my podcast. If you don't know, when you create something, someone has to distribute it out there for you, whether it be music or movies or podcasts or anything like that. And I got a notice that Club Grief had 25 downloads. Now, you might be thinking, 25, that's no big deal. To me, that is a big deal because it lets me know people are listening and I'm connecting with people. And what I want Club Grief to be about is hope. We can talk about loss. We can talk about grief. We can talk about everything around that. But I want to find reasons to keep on living. I want to find reasons to get up in the morning. So I want to focus on hope. Now, back to lessons. I will talk about hope as we go along. Lessons I've learned from loss. And loss comes in many forms. Currently, there's a wildfire in Los Angeles. People have lost many, many material things. And there are multiple resources available and the news covering it all the time. And it is an attention device for the news. There's an old saying that I know people who work in news, if it bleeds, it leads. So we'll be getting a lot of attention about natural disasters. When I think of natural disasters and loss and grief, I think what is the greatest natural disaster is loss of life. And what I want to focus on as far as lessons go is not being prepared, not being ready. Again, this correlates to natural disasters when people are ready or aren't ready. Here in Southern California, they tell you be ready for the earthquake. But how many of us are really ready? I know I'm not. They tell you be prepared for many things. Some people are, some people aren't. I was not prepared for any of the loss I've experienced. My father died suddenly in 1991. I was on the West Coast. He was on the East Coast. I found my mother-in-law dead Thanksgiving morning, 2018. I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared. It was a shock. My mother died suddenly, June 14th, 2020. Suddenly, I wasn't prepared. Nobody was. Then my younger brother around Christmas time, 2021, again, suddenly we got a call. He's gone. And of course, the hardest loss of all was my wife, Heidi. And let me share with you what I learned from sudden loss. Not talking about the loss of a loved one who has a disease and they're in hospice or there's no hope or no cure and you're watching them wither away. And that must be very, very difficult. But it gives you time to prepare and say, okay, here's what we need to do when it happens. And it's not to say that it's not devastating. There's not grief. There's not loss. There is, of course, because you know this person is going to leave. You don't know when, and suddenly they're gone. When it came to my mother-in-law, it was a body. It's no longer the person, a body. Paramedics go. The police are standing there staring at you, telling you have to claim the body and you have to do something. My mother-in-law wasn't ready. She had no money. She had debt. She had a lot of things going against her. There was no will, no property, no accounts, nothing. We had no plan, my wife and I. I was standing there dumbfounded, not knowing what to say, not knowing what to do. Luckily, I was able to contact a funeral home and they told me what the police do. This is not everybody, but it's something they do so they don't have to be responsible. And then the coroner has to come. So I won't go into the details. I probably spoke about it before, but if you want, I can speak about it again at another time. And then again, with my wife. When the paramedics came, turned around and left, and I was put into shock, the police were standing there, looking at me, asking me, what is it I'm going to do now with the body? With the body. Not my wife, not Heidi, the body. And all I can tell you is I tried to keep myself from going into shock anymore and keep stable and go into survival mode. And I guess I got lucky, because when I found that the coroner's not going to come and the police are standing there saying the coroner's not going to come, I realized I have to do something. They suggested a local funeral home. I called them, and because I had care credit, they came over and they removed the body. Not my wife, not Heidi, the body. And that, I can still see that black bag. Yes, they really do use black body bags. The police left, the body was gone, and I'm standing there with my daughter in shock, crying, trying to figure out what to do. Lesson learned from that. Be ready. How can you be ready, though? Well, think ahead. As gruesome as it might sound, be prepared. Think, okay, someday something's going to happen. Let me prepare so the people I leave behind don't have to go through everything I went through and make it hard on them. So that's one big lesson I've learned. Also realize when a police person says claim the body, you do not have to claim the body. Now, I'm not saying it's a loved one you're not claiming, but in the case of my mother-in-law, I didn't claim the body, and the coroner did come. We did end up getting her ashes, and everything worked out. With my wife, of course, it was a lot different. As sad as it might sound, death, loss, grief is all a business. People are in business of profiting from death, loss, and grief. It's just a fact. I paid for the cremation. I had to have an autopsy done. That's another thing. What about an autopsy? If they don't pass away in a hospital or a place that has care, you're probably not going to get one. And if you want to get one, thousands and thousands of dollars. Again, I got lucky in the UCLA health program that I am affiliated with, because you really do want to know what this person died of. And the only way of finding out is an autopsy. So keep that in mind too. Again, this is the business of death. After the person leaves and it's a body, there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to do. It's hard, very, very hard. But you know what? You're not alone. You're going to get through that time and continue on the grief journey. Remember, there is hope. I want to give you some hope, and there is a light in the dark. Let me recite the end of one of my favorite poems for you. It's by Robert Frost. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep.